Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Art Forum. Welcome to semester 2 if you're one of our students. If you haven't met me before, my name's David Sequeira. I'm the director of the Margaret Lawrence Gallery, and I'm also the person that has the privilege of coordinating the Art Forum program. And before we begin, before I introduce our guest speaker, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional landowners. Well, I'm inviting you to join me in acknowledging the traditional landowners, the traditional custodians of the land on which you're located. And for me, it's Bunurong and Wurundjeri land, which is part of the Kulin Nation. And to acknowledge that long before the Victorian College of the Arts, or before people built museums, and before we all started engaging in the practice of making art and curating exhibitions, that actually people performed song, dance, they made art, and they engaged in all sorts of rituals, and that these traditions of art practice continue now. And it's with great joy and pleasure that I acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. So our guest speaker today is Jess Johnson. The concept of world building lies at the centre of Jess Johnson's work, which reflects her interests in science fiction, language, technology, and concepts of consciousness. Over several years, her drawings have documented an increasingly complex fictional world. They are meshworks of symbology, humanoid clones, and alien runes placed in architectural settings. Her drawing practice feeds into installations and collaborations in animation, music, fashion, virtual reality, and textile art. Jess has undertaken studio residencies at Pioneer Works in Brooklyn, the MacDowell Colony in New Hampshire, the International Curatorial Studio Program in Brooklyn, the Bemis Center in Nebraska, and the University of Edinburgh's Talbot Rice Gallery. In May of 2018, Jess and collaborator Simon Ward presented Terminus, a major 5-part virtual reality commission and solo exhibition at the National Gallery of Australia. Terminus is currently on a multi-year tour throughout Australasia. Jess Johnson lives and works in New York and Auckland, which is where she's speaking to us from today. Wherever you are, please make Jess very, very welcome. Over to you, Jess.
Hi, thanks, David. I'm just going to share my screen. Might be this one. Yes, is that working? Oh,
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
This is my first time preparing something in Google Sheets this morning, so this is my practice title page, which I'm decided to leave up. I'll just see if, no, God. Okay. Yeah, so I've also managed to get through all of 2020 in New York, avoiding doing these Zoom presentations. So this is my first one. Not very au fait with them, and apologies if they're a bit clunky. So most of you will know me for my drawings, which this is an example of. One thing also is I find it very disconcerting having to see my face on screen. So I'm just going to let Clarence host while I talk, so I don't have to watch myself talking to everyone. So yeah, back a step. Most people know me from my drawings, but I think it's important to show where my drawings came from and how they developed into what they are now, which feeds into other mediums and my wider collaborative practice. Like everyone, all the students there at VCA, my artwork is intrinsically linked to who I am and my interests and my experiences, and a lot of the distinctive themes and elements of my drawings were evident of what I was drawing back in my childhood. So a lot of the dense repeating patterns and flat comic graphics and coiled worms and all the body horror is what I was drawing in my teen years. So first off, I just want to blast through a bunch of images and influences that I grabbed from my, what would you call it, like a mood board folder this morning. They're a combination of things I was into as a teenager and still am now, and also a few contemporary artists who are very influential to me. And hopefully seeing these will give you a bit of a foundational insight into my artwork as you know it now. So here we go. My first encounters with art were through things in popular culture like books, book covers, album artwork, movie posters, comics, and gig flyers. Some of my favorite images are like the sci-fi book covers from the 60s and 70s, which you know, I'd get cheap from all the secondhand bookstores when I was a kid, and I've still got a big collection of them. Also the themes of some of my favorite authors as well were very seminal to my formation as an artist, and there's still things that I investigate in my own practice. Octavia Butler, she's one of my favorite authors. She's only written like 15 books, but every one is just a perfect gem. Ursula Le Guin, I'm sure you know a lot of you are familiar with these. Also, the artwork of comics, you know, video games and movies. The original Dark Crystal movie was one of my favorites as a kid, and like a lot of the esoteric, mystical themes of the movies that I watched when I was a kid, like in The Never-Ending Story and The Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal. Yeah, so they were like a lot of my gateways into the I don't know, wider world outside of small town New Zealand. This is one of my favorite artists, Susan Te Kahari King. She's a New Zealand artist, and she draws these like dense mashups of cartoons and influences. She's also autistic, and she's non-verbal, so I feel like drawing for her has developed as her primary means of communication. This is probably indicative of like a lot of artwork that I'm most drawn to, which is very dissimilar to like the rigidness of my own artwork. I like drawing that is very unfiltered and raw, and I find like artwork that's too much like my own, which is I guess very structurally rigid. I find it almost off-putting. So what else have we got? Chris Foss, Ernst Haeckel, Fletcher Hanks, Paula Foley, Lu Yang. She's a young Chinese video artist who I think is she's incredible. Her work is just this relentless maximalism. And it's like, I think I've been following her for a few years, and it's like she just always feels like 10 steps ahead of me and what I don't want to achieve or aspire to. But yeah, she's wonderful. Hans Friedman de Vries, he was a Dutch Renaissance architect, painter and engineer. He was around in the 1500s. He's known for his work with developing like this rules of perspective, but I think what I most like of his are like these architectural sort of follies, like these columns that he's drawn on the right there. Who else? We've got Geiger, Jack Kirby. These are the artists that I didn't have them as posters on my bedroom wall as a teenager, but I would have if I had had access to posters of them. But yeah. Sasha Braunig, she's a New York contemporary painter. I don't know what to say about her work, but it's incredible. It just kind of has that zing in my brain. little side note is that I've been a fan of her work for ages, and when I was like renting out or subletting out my apartment in New York, she actually responded to my ad and ended up subletting my apartment for a couple of weeks, which was really exciting for me. Shigeru Sugiura, sorry about my terrible pronunciation. He is a Japanese manga artist who he was born in, I think, like 1905 or something like that. But yeah, his work just looks so freaking contemporary. Okay, so that's the end of the grab bag of influences. And yeah, what I want to kind of touch on now is, I guess, like, yeah, I've been drawing this science fiction world for about a decade now. But prior to embarking on my current direction in my drawings, I was doing a lot of like poster and gig flyers and album artwork. So I want to go back a number of years and just show you this very important formative period of where my current drawings are developed from. So during my time living in Melbourne, I ran this gallery called Hell with my ex-partner, Jordan Morani. And one important part of Hell Gallery was, that fed into my current drawing practice, is that I would make a hand-drawn poster for every exhibition there, and I would photocopy them and plaster them around town. And these posters became something that I just put a lot of effort into, and I felt a lot of like freedom, I guess, doing them. I wasn't like editing myself or or like concerned with making artwork as such. And so I ended up like channeling a lot of stuff into them that I hadn't previously given an outlet to in my artwork. So things like my love of comics and sci-fi and horror movies and collage and the DIY scene. Whereas perhaps previously I might have had certain hang-ups about what was real art or serious art, but by doing these posters, I reconnected with this very like unfiltered enjoyment of drawing, which was close to how I'd felt about drawing as a teenager before I went to art school and probably got all self-conscious. So making these posters and like seeing them embraced, by the little scene that gravitated around Hell Gallery really gave me like the confidence as an artist, I guess. So when Hell Gallery finished up, I decided to start drawing full time. And early on, I used to think about the drawings that I was doing them in a similar way to like the posters that I was producing for Hell, but instead of making posters for other people's exhibitions and shows, I was kind of just producing these personal posters for myself, but they still incorporated a lot of the same elements that I developed during like making posters for people, sort of the elaborate borders and the use of text and the central elements and all of that. So I'm just going to flick through some of my drawings from the last few years. Just see where they progress, I guess. So I guess over time I've developed this very individual style methodology in constructing my drawings. I use a lot of geometry and symbolism and patterning. I think early on my drawings used to be a lot more two-dimensional, and as I got better at drawing, I just started being able to incorporate perspective and pushing into space and and like this kind of internal language of imagery and architecture and the worms and gargoyles and figures developed. I don't like to plan things too much in my drawings. I usually just start off with one element, like the text or like a central image. And then when I'm drawing that element, I'll start to think of the next thing. And it's this very like slow emergence of imagery and ideas that arise during the labor process. Yeah, it's like, I think time is a really important part of the work. Just those really long hours you spend staring at a blank sheet of paper, and making hundreds of repetitive marks, and that kind of allows my mind to get to a place where all the elements start to morph and fit together in new arrangements. Like I always say, like, I don't think, a lot of people always think my drawings are created digitally, but it's like the hand-drawn part of it is extremely integral into developing the imagery, because I always say if I had a computer, or I was trying to make them on a computer and I had access to a delete button, they would become too perfect and cold, whereas having to like commit to the pen and paper and all of the mistakes and mutations that happen during that process, that kind of gives it this generative life. Yeah, so going on from the drawings themselves, like all of my drawings, I will scan them at really high res, and then the digital images from the scan will feed out onto all of these different collaborations. I'm just going to talk about some of them now. What we're going to start with. So this was a collaboration I did with an Australian label called Romance Was Born in 2015. This is some of their, I can never pronounce it right, but is it couture wear? I did a collection with them where I basically handed over like several years worth of drawing in a digital archive and gave them free rein to produce a line of, I think it was winter clothing from, this is them on display at the Heidi Museum in 2019 as part of my Terminus exhibition. One thing with my collaborations is that the world gets filtered through the imagination and creativity of other people, and so it expands the world in ways that I couldn't do solely on my own, and that kind of creates this generative loop where what other people introduce into the world feeds back into what I do, and then that's kind of this back and forth is this like propulsive effect. It's also because I'm so in control of this universe that I make, and I think I'm very controlling in all aspects of my life, that it's kind of this relief for me to give that control over to other people in my collaborations. So the benefits of like collaborating with other people and like handing my work over to other people is that I get to have a reprieve from all of the control, and it expands it and produces more material which I can then repurpose and garbled. And another one of my important collaborators is my mother. I started making works with her in 2018, and it's still ongoing. She's a really accomplished quilt maker, but prior to us making work together, she hadn't had any outlet to exhibit them. You know, they were just always cherished gifts that the family and friends would get. But like growing up, I would, she always had like a work area in the corner of the house where she would be like hand dyeing and cutting and piecing and arranging the material into these quilts. And I think all the patterning and the process really sunk into my own art making, which I only became to understand and acknowledge several years ago. And it felt like a very natural affinity for us to work together. I think she was the one who actually suggested it initially, like translating my drawings into quilts. Yeah, so the process for the quilts is that I'll get elements of my drawings, I'll isolate them from the digital scans and create these new compositions or repeated patterns, and I'll get it printed onto fabric in New York and then send them to Mum in New Zealand, and then we communicate over you know, Skype and video chat, or Skype and chat about the composition and colours and all of that. That's Mum in her studio in Whangarei in New Zealand. I usually only get to see the quilts for the first time whenever I come back to. Well, I mean, I'm in New Zealand now, but just for the duration of us working together, most of it is done remotely. It's most of my collaborations are all done remotely because I live in different countries from everyone. But it would always just be such this I don't know, lovely feeling walking into a studio and getting to see the quilts for the first time in the flesh, after only seeing them as, you know, these little like 2-inch images on a screen, and then in the flesh they're just such these tactile, beautiful objects that just have all of this warmth imbued in them. It's also a really nice kind of what would you call it, bouncing between the different mediums that I do in my collaborations, because I do a lot of all of the hard digital VR stuff with Simon, and then as a relief from that, I'll bounce on to doing you know, the quilts with Mum, just going between the digital and analog like that. What did I do? Oh, there's some of Mum's quilts in display at Heidi in 2019. Yeah, I mean, it's also been like a really cool thing for Mum to get to see her work in museums, you know, the age of 74, after, you know, after having accrued, you know, a lifetime of like skill and knowledge in making these things, but not having that kind of external validation outside her family, and for her to, like, you know, get to go along to openings and also sell the work as well. Yeah, so it's been like one of the most I don't know, joyful collaborations I've done. I think, oh God, sorry. Okay, I think I'm here. So my other main collaborator is Simon Ward. That's Simon there with the camera. He's an animator and video director who is based in Wellington, New Zealand, and we've been working together since I think it's like 2013 now. That's me and Simon on the left there, and I don't know if like this little pop-up. Oh yeah, and then there's also Andrew Clark, who is our composer who does all the soundtracks for our VR and animations. And on the left is our friend Luke, who he helps with some of the kind of digital assets as well, cutting things out in Photoshop and building things. He's a musician called Disaster Radio from New Zealand. yeah, the team's actually kind of bigger than that. There's like several of us, or friends who I get to like kind of pull together for larger commissions or VR works. So Simon, when I first started working with Simon in 2013, and we made our first animation together called Mnemonic Pulse, it felt like, I should say how we met actually. Yeah, I knew Simon for his music videos that he made mainly for New Zealand bands, and I was always a fan of just his music video style, and he knew me for my drawing practice as well. And we had a mutual friend who just basically creatively match made us, who sent us an email saying, I know you guys are fans of each other's works, you should make stuff together. And so in 2013, he came and visited me in Melbourne, and we just immediately launched into making things together. And we made a video called Mnemonic Pulse, which was it was kind of like made from like the graphical perspective of like a first-person shooter game or something. We're having this simulated experience of walking through one of my drawings. And while that was getting made, there was also all these advances in virtual reality that was happening. We just started reading about it and hearing all these murmurs about Oculus Rift and these consumer headsets and what have you. And so that planted the seed for our next project, which was to move into virtual reality. And there seemed to be this really fortuitous like synergy, I guess, and meeting Simon together with all the advances in VR technology. And I guess my drawings were at this developmental point as well, where moving the world of my drawings into virtual reality just seemed like this thing that needed to happen. So I think it was like 2014 we acquired a Oculus Rift development kit. We got a little grant, I think, from Arts Victoria of $10,000, and Simon bought himself a computer that was like grunty enough to run the software, and then we got this really clunky development headset, and we started working on Ixion Gate, which was our first VR experience. I don't have any pictures of Ixion Gate, unfortunately, but yeah, that was premiered at the National Gallery of Victoria in 2015. I should mention this slide up here. This was another work that we made called Whole Wide World, which consisted of like 5 animations, and Simon worked really. It was a little bit atypical of how we worked together, but he basically took like a single drawing and he recreated every element of that drawing, so it became like this like moving tapestry on this like hypnotic animated loop. Generally all our collaborative work, I always design the installation or how it's going to be presented, and I'll design these like environments or stages for the animations and VR. That's what we got. This was Gene Tecker Archaic, which was another collaborative work I did with Simon, and Andrew did the soundtrack as well. This was translating a lot of the characters of my worlds into like a pixel art, which were then like housed inside this kind of subterranean dungeon side scroller game. It's not a game yet, it's just a straight video, but we have intentions of making it into a playable game. Like a lot of the work that we do together, there's kind of no endpoint. It's just like, I mean, we started making work, Gene Tech or Archaic in 2018, but it's still evolving. It's like, so there's all these different incarnations which have happened with Gene Tech or Archaic, as well as Whole Wide World, that previous one, and Terminus, which is our big VR piece. But it's like we just keep tinkering and working until the guillotine comes down and we have to like hand it to the gallery to show it. But as soon as like we get it back, we'll keep working on it, and then like slip in the new version of it to the next showing, that kind of thing. Oh, this was like the part 2 of Gene Tech or Archaic, which was like this weird bunker down at the Christchurch Art Gallery. This has become like a permanent installation there. I think it was only supposed to be there for a year, but don't think it's going anywhere. This is like kind of the hyper-real version of the pixelated video game. You remember like in sort of early video games where it would just be, it's really rudimentary pixel art, but then on the video game cover it would be like this hyper-real painting, and it was like your imagination was supposed to like fill in the gaps of the pixel artwork. So this is like the hyper-real cover art of the pixel game, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And this brings us to Terminus. Terminus is probably the most ambitious, biggest project I've ever worked on, and it's also the artwork that refuses to die. Well, I mean, not that I want it to die, but it just, we made this in 2018 that was commissioned by the National Gallery of Australia, and it consisted of 5 VR experiences that is housed in this immersive installation of like these bespoke kind of Minecraft structures, and this tessellated floor map, which has these 5 different realms in it. And so you navigate over the floor map to get to each individual realm, and the VR equipment is embedded within the structure, so that will send you to that particular chapter of Terminus. So this was initially premiered at the National Gallery in 2018, but then it was picked up as a touring exhibition. So the National Gallery have been touring it around to a lot of regional centres in Australia ever since. I really like that it goes to a lot of out of the way regional places, because VR itself is still quite inaccessible to most people. Like I mentioned, you need like a really expensive high-end gaming computer to run these kinds of experiences, which is out of most people's means. So so the fact that the National Gallery is touring it to a lot of regional centres, to a lot of teenagers and school kids who wouldn't have access to this technology, I really like that. Art can be their first, art can be their first introduction to virtual reality, as opposed to, I guess, other more commercial industries. There's just some more pictures of Terminus at the National Gallery. It's also touring around New Zealand now as well, and parts of Asia. Like I've kind of lost count of how many different galleries it's been to, but yeah, it's quite often been on at multiple galleries at the same time in different countries. It requires a lot of like administration. I guess that's why I said like that's the artwork that refuses to die, because every incarnation it has, it's a lot of administrative task, which kind of grinds everything else to a halt. Where I'd like to be making new stuff as well. This was at the Heidi Museum in Melbourne, 2019. I really liked this version of it, because Heidi did a really great job of loaning drawings back from various collectors, and they also showed other like tangential parts of my artwork as well, like the quilts that I make with Mum, etc. That's been like one of my favorite versions of Terminus. These are some screen grabs from the VR. Of course, it's really hard to like show the virtual reality artworks without putting everyone in headsets. So you just kind of have to resort to these screen grabs as stills. But Simon, I think he had access to, maybe it was 8 years worth of drawings with the VR experiences. Which he sorry, that was an abrupt ending. That's all. Thanks for listening. Any questions?
Well, Jess, thank you so much for taking us through an extraordinary practice, an extraordinary career, right from the early days, from the areas that interest you right through to Terminus. We've got a couple of questions that have come in through the chat. The first one is, do you use life models in your drawings? And if so, are they a bit freaked out when they see the results, or is this sense of artificiality that comes through in the figures kind of literally drawn from the imagination?
It's a combination. For the most part, I'll just use the internet to find specific like contortions that I want. So I think early on I used to Google a lot of like yoga poses or circus performers or gymnastical things. So I use just like a lot of found images for reference, but then also if I want a specific pose, I've just asked whoever's around me to pose in that way, and then I'll take a picture of them and use that as reference. And I do really like them to get their clothes off as well. So it's to
I get it.
Like clothes or yeah.
You've taken us through a whole range of things, from the virtual reality, the drawings, the prints, the animations, the posters, and the fashion. Are there any areas that you wouldn't go, that like Jess Johnson, no, I'm not that kind of artist? Is there any zone you wouldn't go into?
God. I can't. I mean, the fact that I can't think of any zone that I wouldn't go into is probably indicative of that being no. I mean, a recent thing that I've been working on in the last few months is making figurines, like toys, with this Hong Kong company who I really like. I mean, I know that's an area that a lot of artists wouldn't touch with the yard pole. I think I've got that analogy wrong, but I mean, it's like I said, like the way that I got into art was through stuff in popular culture. It was like the comics, the music, the toys and figurines. It's like the stuff that my entry point into art, or the stuff that like whenever I travel and go to a museum, I go to the museum shop and I want to buy a tote bag. It's like that's how it's not how I engage with it, but it's like, so I'm kind of giving a very garbled answer here, but yeah, there's probably nowhere I wouldn't want to go.
That's great. Can you talk to the text that you use? Like, these are very strange phrases, and there's a question that's come through that asks, how do these phrases come to you? Where do they come from?
Yeah, the text is really important in the drawings. Not so much in the animations or VR or the other collaborations, but in terms of the drawings and the composition and the starting point, the text is like one of the most important parts of it. I have like Google Docs where I just have these like long running lists of like words or phrases that I'll find in books or, you know, news or any kind of writing, like new science stuff, and just anything that kind of has a little zing or speaks to me. And then I might mash them up or change the spelling of words, because I like certain letters over other letters. And then like when I'm starting a new series of drawings, I usually will open up this doc and I'll choose several which have some kind of emotional tone that suits whatever I'm feeling about that next series of drawings. And then each like phrase or word will become like the scaffolding on what I create the whole drawing around. Yeah, but it's kind of amorphous and hard to kind of pin down. It's like a nascent language or something. And I've talked about like, yeah, you're building the imagery, you're building the world, like the language has to form at the same time. So those two are like kind of quite intrinsically linked for me, as the imagery and the language of the world.
Yeah, thanks. Look, this question is about art conservation. And the question is the native digital format integral to each work? So for virtual reality work in Terminus, for example, in 20 or 50 years, do you imagine Terminus being presented on the same equipment that it's presently being shown on, like with the headsets, or could the work be represented in newer non-virtual reality forms that may not be created right now?
Probably the latter. Like I'm not beholden to the technology. The technology is just a vehicle to communicating something. So if the communication changes, then yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. There's a question about moving into the virtual reality space, and I know you talked about it in terms of, you'd known of each other's works, your collaborator, you'd known of each other's works, but didn't know each other, and you were kind of introduced to each other. But this question says, it's a highly technical space as opposed to something like drawing, and I'm not saying that drawing's not technical, but that it's a different kind of technology. What prompted the shift into virtual reality?
Well, it was basically just a marriage of our different skill sets. My expertise and skill is with pen and paper, and I can also do stuff in physical space. Like I really like doing the installations and transforming the environments and what have you, but I'm shithouse on computers. But it's whereas Simon, he's self-taught, and he's extremely online and lives and breathes these programs. It's like we're very, very different, but there's these odd similarities where it's like if I don't if a long period of time has gone where I'm not able to draw, or I'm not able to like have a session during the day of drawing, like I get really twitchy. And if I have to be on a computer for too long, I feel really frazzled and awful. And it's the complete inverse for Simon, is like he gets all twitchy and disjointed if he hasn't been at a computer for like 10 hours a day. But yeah, it's like I think we are moving to the same, well, we want to achieve the same point, but it's like I've got pen and paper at my disposal, and he's got all of this skill and knowledge with translating it into the digital world. But we're still very we keep to our own respective paths, and we have a lot of autonomy in both those areas. But I think we've just got the shared vision or sensibility at the end point. So yeah.
Great. Look, we've got time for the very last question. I should just do a shout out to everybody in the audience who's put questions, who have put questions in the chat. We won't get to all of them, but thank you so much. This last question asks about the imagery itself, and it says, you know, a lot of your images, they look and feel like modern day temples. How does religion or secularity come into your work?
I don't know. I don't know.
And it may not come into your work, but the question really goes to, you know, perhaps you could talk about that kind of imagery, that specific use of architecture that features in a lot of Terminus, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does, but I just find it hard to answer in language. I mean, there's a lot of like kind of themes in my work which I know are evident because people always ask me about them, but it's like I kind of don't get shocked, but it's yeah, it's just like it's a visual language, and when I have to try to like kind of package it into words, I get really kind of stumped sometimes. And obviously there's all of this religious stuff in there, but I've got no idea. I don't have a didactic kind of packaged answer for anything. Like I wasn't raised religious. I think there's like the memories that kind of pop into my head is like kind of going to going to Europe for the first time and going into those churches, and there'll just be that saturation of like detail and wealth, and it was almost like they were trying to you know, stupefy people by all of that sensory detail. Yeah, I mean that's not really an answer or anything, but it's just, yeah, there's something about yeah, maybe the dazzle of it gets to lull people into other states of being or something.
Well, Jess, thank you so much for your generosity today and your energy. You know, like I just really, there's not a lot for me to say except thank you and congratulations on a stunning body of work and a stunning career. It's just been so great to have you share all of that with us from New York. Just, you know, I don't know if you know this, but Melbourne's just slowly emerging from its 5th lockdown, and to have you talk about your work and the images, and especially from the early days, right from Hal's, right through to now. I don't know, on a personal level, it's inspiring to follow that trajectory. So thank you so much for being with us. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us today. We don't take it lightly that you join us for Art Forum, and we hope that you will join us for Art Forum, same time, well, a different link, and you'll get that link. Our guest speaker next week is Megan Cope. Please, wherever you are, a big thank you to Jess Johnson, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening.